Leave No One Behind is funded through the Mitigating Against Educational Disadvantage Fund, organised by the Cork Access Network, hosted by Cork ETB. It demonstrates the shared commitment to achieving the UNESCO Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Goals 4 and 11. The UN 2030 Agenda is a universal and collective commitment by government, civil society, the private sector, youth, United Nations and other multilateral agencies to tackle educational challenges and build systems that are inclusive, equitable and relevant to all learners. This event is part of a series of events hosted by the CAN network to provide an outcomes-focused approach, which will lead and inform an action plan for increasing education opportunity and access in the Cork region. This webinar features as part of a week-long programme of activities in January 2022, highlighting mitigating factors, agents of change and opportunities to support access for all. It also aims to enable partners to pledge sustainable and consistent levels of support and demonstrate good practice and access for all learners, embedding and further building upon existing initiatives delivering education in communities, and creating new pathways for progression among and between partners. And we're joined now by a really star-studded panel led by Jim Breslin, who is the Secretary General of the new department. We're still calling it the new Department of Further Higher Education, Innovation, Research and Science, by Paula Cogan, who is President of Cork Chamber, and by Siobhan O'Dowd from Ballyphehane Community Development Project and also Cork Learning City. And we'll be joined later by Bob Savage, who is VP of Dell Technologies and also Chairman of the National Skills Council. So if I turn first to Jim, and welcome Jim, and maybe in terms of the new department, could you maybe briefly outline the department's commitment to active inclusion in terms of access to education and progression?
Yeah, thanks, Barry. So it really is one of the key themes for the new department that's stitched into what we're trying to achieve is inclusion, and working on that with all the partners that are required to deliver that. Drawing on work like you're doing in the Cork Access Network, which is really important. I think all of us who are involved in education know the power that education has to transform individuals, to transform families, to transform communities. And there's a real onus on us to spread that transformation, to make sure that all of the priority groups that we identify have access, not just access, but participation and success in education. We will early next year bring out the National Access Plan. And again, I think we'll draw on some of the work here that's taking place in Cork, but also experience around the country and how you do that really well.
Right, thanks Jim. And maybe Paula, turning to yourself from the point of view of business in the city and Cork Chamber membership, how important is access to education viewed by the Chamber?
It's hugely important. I mean, we do a survey every quarter with our members, and talent attraction is either number 1 or 2 on all of those surveys consistently for the last 5 years. So as you can imagine, during COVID, it's become increasingly important that we attract but also retain the best of talent within organisations, and training is a key success factor in that as well. So it's absolutely crucial and will continue to be crucial in the next 10 years.
Right, thanks Paula. And maybe turning to yourself then, Siobhan, in terms of even the work you're doing in Ballyphehane Community Project, the hard to reach members of society in terms of education, how are you driving that on?
Well, I think it's to try and be imaginative, and I suppose education is a broad church, so to provide the kinds of education and to encourage the different education providers to fund the kind of education that people want. So meeting people where they're at. And obviously, like Paula said, during COVID, you know, sort of to have and to support people to be able to access education in online platforms, which, you know, was a huge leap for some people. Mm-hmm. So it's about the kinds of education. It's about what gets considered education, and that, you know, sometimes I think it's very much education for, so it might be for employment or for training or for, and I suppose where we come from in Balafan, Toker CDP, and I know it's shared by projects across learning neighbourhoods, is that education's a right in and of itself, and so rather than for, it's just where, you know, it stands on its own, and then people of all age groups, of all abilities, of all interests, need to be able to find their own pathways and be supported to do that.
Right, yeah. And I guess one of the forums or fora for that then, Jim, would be in terms of the role and the connection between industry and education, and I suppose particular further education and training, as well as higher education. And how is your department addressing that very broad continuum and connecting with industry, we'll say?
Yeah, I think that crucially we all have to work together. The term is used as unified, not uniform. I think based on what Siobhan has said, we see a whole diversity of need out there, and there's different roles for people to play in that. Not everybody should try and play the same role. So we need a diversity of choice, we need multiple pathways, we need offerings that attract people. And as Siobhan said, it's about a right to participate in society. So if you're lacking in basic literacy, if you're lacking in digital skills, how do you actually access all of the things that go with being a citizen? So we, as an education community, we have a real responsibility to meet people where they are, not where we think they should be. Meet them where they are, give them the tools to develop basic skills, literacy skills and so on, and then see them flourish and walk with them along that pathway. And that needs our system to work together. The pathways have to cross over. They can't just be in silos. And I think, again, the work that's been done here to bring all of those elements together, to bring employers into the conversation, the local authority, that's the type of unified response that's needed for the challenges we face.
Yeah, and we'll address some of those issues with Bob Savage later on from Dell. But I suppose, Paula, again, the chamber within the city in particular, and I guess with multinational corporations around the county as well, have put a lot of emphasis on the training of young people.
Certainly. Again, I suppose we're very, very fortunate. We have an amazing talent pool here in Cork between our third level institutes and the training that's delivered through those institutes. But again, I would say a younger age demographic want to change. You know, I suppose traditionally you had a role and you stuck to that until you retired. They're looking for variation in their roles, variation in their career. So it's incredibly important for organisations that they can support that, particularly in a young demographic and actually in an older demographic as well. And as Siobhan has mentioned, you know, the opportunities for learning and education have changed dramatically during COVID. So people are able to, you know, drop into a particular programme for a period of time, maybe then take on another programme and return to a programme again. That wasn't an option 5 or 6 years ago. And I suppose, again, in Cork, we're incredibly lucky to have that relationship between the universities and the educational institutes and the employers. So again, you know, that communication, that constant communication, where there may be a deficit in learning in a particular sector, that we're able to support that as well. And I think that's incredibly important to a younger age demographic as well, that they have that opportunity to learn and work at the same time.
Excellent, yeah. I mean, Jim has made a very good point there, Siobhan, in terms of meeting people where they are, not where we want them to be. How would you see it from the perspective of the individual learner who's trying to get into the system? Because to me, I think it's very important what we're doing here with City Council, with the educational institutions. But it's how do you get that message to the learner himself or herself to come into the system, or should we have a system at all?
Yeah, I think we probably need systems, and I think like asking learners, like, what is it you want to learn? What you know, kind of gets you excited in the morning and out of bed and wanting to you know, sort of, you know, find out something new about something maybe you know a little bit about. I suppose, being very conscious of you know, kind of peer learning. So people often decide what they want to learn within their peer group. and responding to that. And, you know, so having kind of access at community level so that people can come and say, this is what I want to do. And then I think, you know, she was a really good radical community educator, but she had this phrase one time, you know, aromatherapy might be a great place to start, but it may not be such a good place to end up.
Yeah.
You know, so that sense that there is a continuum, and there's nothing wrong with aromatherapy, you know, and if that scent leads you on a little bit further, that's great. So it's kind of engaging people's interests, and I mean that happens for all of us as learners. I think one of the amazing things about COVID was it challenged us all to learn really quickly, and you know, is it Paul Ryan's the WHO, the kind of, you know, the not being afraid to make a mistake, because it's actually worse not to do things than not try it all or wait for the perfect thing. And Paul was sort of saying about, you know, being able to sample, try a few new things. So I think like as a city, as agencies, as communities, as individuals, we were all learning together. And in some ways, there was a huge kind of democratization of education during COVID. And also maybe a little bit less about the silo. So, you know, Jim represents education, and there'll be KPIs, and everybody will have to meet them here in the city and all over across the country. And health and local authorities all have their own, but there was, you know, I suppose, like we're concentrating on goals 4 and 11, but 17, I think, was a challenge for us all, and that partnership in learning, something that was hugely new to all of us. You know, sort of this time 2 years ago, we were listening to Morning Ireland or listening to Drive Time. I did, radio is my favourite. So, and we were learning about this new virus, and we had to keep on learning. And that went for everybody, no matter what their levels of education.
Very good. Yeah. I mean, Jim, you've already referred to how good things are here in Cork, right? We all know that. But you also mentioned the National Access Plan. Any chance of some sneak preview of what might be out in that? So some new departures or sustaining existing programs?
So I think it'll reflect progress that has been made. I think we're not starting from scratch. I think there's a lot of work that has achieved. There's a lot of groups that we've made headway with, and yet there's still some systemic barriers that we still need to break down. We have programs in place and we have schemes in place, but a lot of it is about culture. It's about trying to adapt how we offer our services, make them more welcoming, and make people feel that they're genuinely part of a community that embraces them. So we look at the schemes, we look at funding, but also I think we have to continue to work on the ethos that really embraces diversity and brings people together and doesn't ask them to become part of our system. They are part of our community, and we have to bring them center stage into that, and that involves change on our part. So it's not enough that they come through the gate. We want them to be successful. We want them to achieve, and we want them to influence the kind of things we think are a priority. One of the things we've done over the last year is a program called Creating Our Future, which is based on our research and trying to say, what does the Irish population think is important to be researched? And we've gone out to hard-to-reach groups and asked that, and actually it fundamentally changes what your idea is of what is important. If you sit down with groups of people with disabilities or New Irish, they have a very different view of research priorities. And that's absolutely really important that we hear that and that we do something about it, that we actually see our research respond to new ideas, to new thinking, and to definite priorities that exist within our community. And it's the same for our learning community. That will have to change and grow as we include people in it. So I look forward to that. I think next year and the years to come will bring education to the fore in embracing the diversity of the society we now have, and in seeking to build a really strong society. Because if you don't do that, then you lead to fragmentation, and you lead to people questioning, what does this society give me? And I think as an education community, we have to show that we have something for everybody.
Yeah, and it does come back again to success, and what does success mean for the individual learner and the individual institution or for society. So, and so it's not just about the funding, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Paula, again, to come back to yourself, and I know you're very strong in the, shall we say, the problems that have been caused by COVID in terms of education, in terms of society. Maybe it was a chance as well to stop and think, but we had no opportunity, we had no option but to stop. So would you see new directions coming?
Completely. I mean, who would have thought? I myself am back studying again at the moment, and being able to do that online, and I found it really beneficial during COVID to have a pool of new people that you don't get to meet, and diverse ideas as well. And as you said, it's given people the opportunity to pause. I'm intrigued at how many people I've met recently who are back studying in some shape, form or fashion. To Siobhan's point, it might be aromatherapy, but people have this innate want now to connect with people in a very different way than they would have before. But again, if you think of that traditional return to education, potentially would have been very daunting for a lot of people. It probably didn't fit into people's busy lives, again, having to commute into a lecture hall 2 or 3 nights a week, whereas now you're able to deliver it from home and online as well. So it's really changed and transformed the way we deliver training. I think it's also given everybody an opportunity to think of what the next steps will be. And I think from an employment perspective, we hear about this great resignation. So again, it's very much about the individual. To Jim's point, I mean, we're in my day job, I work for an organisation in occupational health, and we're seeing a number of employers who are now trying to support their neurodiverse workforce in a very different manner, and understanding that it has to be about the individual. It can't just always be about the collective.
Yep.
And I think that's very welcome, that people are having those one-on-one conversations and understanding how people will want their training and education delivered as well in a very, very different manner. So while COVID has, I suppose, impacted on the traditional sense in training and how that would be delivered on a one-on-one basis, it's opened up a myriad of other opportunities as well.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe turn to yourself again, Siobhan, then, in terms of the Learning City, and Cork Learning City. How has that weathered the storm in terms of COVID, and is a very important part of the Cork Access Network? So where do you see the Learning City going?
Well, I suppose, as I said, I think we all had to learn, no matter where we came from. And there was a certain kind of equality about that, which was welcome. I think one of the things that we've learned, and I probably would say this, but that there's nothing too big. We've seen what happens when a whole society, whole of government, whole of the city turns to face and take on something. And so now we know it can be done. So there are other kind of issues, climate change, climate crisis, which, maybe doesn't present as immediately as numbers in hospital beds or ICU, but is hugely threatening to, again, it's the whole of society. And, sort of some of the recent kind of EPA studies would say 90% of people surveyed said we really do need to be acting on it. So there is a kind of an understanding and appreciation. Homelessness and housing. So I think those big ticket things that we thought we couldn't do maybe things about, and equality, and inequality, however you define it, probably came under that, or it was some department's responsibility or some agency's responsibility, that we now know we can kind of bring all our energies to bear from community to, and I think Learning City and Learning Neighbourhoods have a huge role to play in that, as they did in the last 2 years, because all of our worlds got a little bit smaller, and narrower, and you know, you have 2 kilometres, 5 kilometres, 10 kilometres, and then a bit more. But you know, even though we shrunk and concentrated collectively on the local, you know, that idea of the global is there too, and I think that's, you know, sort of, that's maybe a leadership role that the learning cities can play. And I think that kind of partnership that's been built up from, you know, and there was a, you know, the COVID City Response Forum, that's a model for leading out on those big challenges, and there are still a huge amount of them. And, you know, but I think there's maybe a little bit of muscle memory that will kick in that says we can do this. And the next time somebody says, well, you can't really do that because it's like, well, hang on, we've spent 2 years doing it. Every single one of us. And, you know, there's something, you know, for all that Cork, and I think Paula will know about this, so will you maybe, Barry, but a trauma-informed city. And we often concentrate on the early years when we talk about that. But, you know, like across the city, in every sector, and in every household, in every family, however that family is made up, there's been a little bit of trauma. And it's not just about death and bereavement, but it's about lots of other things. And we're going to have to help pick one another up out of that.
Very good. I mean, Jim, just sticking with that theme for a second in terms of the learning cities, I know we have a national network of learning cities growing up, and it's a non-traditional way of educating, training people, getting people involved in education. Would the department see that as a good resource to work with?
I think it's a great resource, because I think the reach that people have when they come together is so much greater. So coming together using City or the geography as a platform and using the capability that's there will get us into communities, as Siobhan has said, will get us into groups, will allow us to make connections, will allow people to come in and support each other in doing that. So I think it's a really great frame of reference. And just to go back to COVID, I think COVID makes this more important. I see one of the things with COVID as being an accelerator of trends that we were already seeing. So the mega trends around digitization, we are going to see a lot of displacement over the years to come. We're going to see a lot of change. We're going to see people's skills becoming obsolete and needing new skills. And if we are not to leave people behind, then embracing lifelong learning, the idea that you do your learning when you leave school and then you're done, that will be a thing of the past. It will be lifelong learning. People will have gone to higher education, had a degree, and then will find themselves challenged on skills. They may need to go to further education to do a short course to respond to some change and innovation within their workplace. So this is not one and done. This is going to continue over a lifetime. And having the community of practice within a geography that understands that and helps people along that road is going to be the key to success within those geographies, but also for us as a country.
And maybe again from the national perspective, what you're seeing, the whole matter of the digital divide, is that gap getting wider, or is it putting more disadvantage further outside the pale, if you pardon the pun?
Yeah, I think it's really challenging. There's about a half of our society that doesn't have basic digital skills.
Yeah.
Like that's mind-boggling. Has the skills gap widened? I'm not sure about that. But the importance of that skills gap has widened, because as more and more moves online, for those people who don't have access to devices, or if they have a device, they don't have the basic skills to do that, that puts them at risk, not just in not being able to do a transaction online, but as of being able to participate in our society as a citizen. So it's going to take a really huge effort to work on that. And it's not, people think that's your elderly aunt. It's not. It overlaps. There's an intersection of all of the literacy elements. So somebody with basic literacy problems, reading and writing, is going to be challenged online. So we have to form solutions that address multiple issues with people and put services in place to bring them along on this journey.
Yeah, there's a challenge there, and I think, Paul, again, from the business perspective, that will be felt as well, I think.
Huge challenge. I mean, broadband connectivity, you know, not even the literacy and skills became such a big issue during COVID. You know, we've all been on a Zoom call when something has dropped because somebody doesn't have that connectivity. So that's incredibly important. And you don't want that rural-urban divide as well to become larger. But it's given massive opportunity. I mean, who would have thought, you know, you could do a global role now from Cahersiveen, but that is the reality of the world we live in at the moment. We have a number of people in Cork who are now opened up to an international world from an employment perspective. That wouldn't have existed before again. But again, it's joining up the dots.
Yep.
And I think that's where we are fortunate in Cork, that we can have that collective approach to further education and training.
Yeah, and we are very fortunate in Cork. Last word to yourself, Siobhan, in terms of maybe addressing Jim from the department perspective. What piece of the jigsaw would you like to see put in place now with the new department?
I suppose maybe the thing I know what Jim was saying about, you know, people skills becoming obsolete, and it's, you know, the metaverse and the digital world, and from where I work, I think they're both important, because I think more people across age groups, young families, people pursuing training and education and progression, and older people got access to digital devices during COVID, and that's I interviewed a woman for SESCA, the Equality Alliance Day, which marks actually today the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And her tablet came from Cork City Council, VH Friendly. The tutoring and the access came from the CDP to Cork Kerry Community Health Care supported program called Singing for the Brain. But the people skills that she had, the tablet, the skills that helped her utilize that tablet came from human beings who could find out. And a tutor of ours, Kay, who did this for a lot of people, was somehow able to tailor, you know, sort of some of these tablets and devices for the people who were receiving them. So, you know, the acorns come loaded with a whole load of stuff if you're an older person that might be of interest. RIP.ie gets visited very regularly. But that's the same as the back page of the Examiner.
Sure.
Yeah, where, you know, people start off their reading of the paper maybe sometimes. But, and it's that thing about, you know, starting where people are at, enticing them in by what they're interested in. Someone who says, I won't ever be able to use that, but can't go to Mass, somehow now discovers, because Kay has loaded a particular connection on, that they can attend Mass anywhere in the city, and probably globally as well. So I think the matching the kind of people skills and that sort of sense of knowing that community, what they're interested in, with the digital devices that can help people get there.
Yeah.
But I think we do need connection as well, not just digital connection.
Sure.
The metaverse probably will be fine, and I think Bill Gates has said we'll all be doing everything on it in a few years' time, and I hope he's wrong, because I think something about community is about the getting people together, and I think, yeah, we've done the Zooms and the Teams and all the rest of it, but there is something nice about connecting up, and also something learning about connecting up that you may not get across the Zoom screen.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks, Siobhan. And we'll have a chat with Bob as well now in a few moments. And then I think you've posed some questions for our educational leaders here in Cork, which we'll put to them in the next session. So thanks to Jim, Paula and Siobhan for their excellent contributions. Thank you. Okay, turning to yourself, Bob, in terms of both the Vice President of Dell Technologies here in Cork, but also as an educator, having been chairman of CIT governing body for a good number of years, first chairman of the Munster Technological University, and indeed chair of the National Skills Council. In terms of the good practices in Dell, in terms of supporting access to education, could you outline why Dell support access to education in the workplace and some good examples as to how you're achieving this in Dell?
Thanks, Barry. Dell has been committed to lifelong learning for many years, but now it's more important than ever with the pace of digital transformation. As you know, we have many team members in Ireland, and reskilling and upskilling of our present workforce is a top priority, and we have many initiatives underway. One of them, called Transform, in association with SkillsNet and Technological University of Dublin, has upskilled 900 team members over the last 2 years in digital technology.
And I know, Bob, that you value the value proposition of widening the talent net, and I know it's been important, and other members of the panel have mentioned this morning, the whole idea of the importance of retaining staff, not just having a good talent pool, but retaining staff. How do you see education in the workplace as being part of that retention mechanism?
There's a war for talent going on right now, and we have skills shortages in many sectors. I've always been focused on giving opportunity to everybody to develop their career, and now more than ever is the right time to broaden the net. We in Dell, for instance, are doing a program called Reboot, where we are giving women the opportunity to come back to the workforce. It's been a fantastic success, and we plan on running it twice next year and maybe focus it on an area of technology like cybersecurity. We have many other examples, and if I may, I'll talk about two. We're running a neurodiversity awareness initiative with MTU and UCC's Disability Support Services to highlight the support available in the workplace. And this is key to building an inclusive workforce. And also, we've hosted a number of career workshops with the Cork Migrant Centre in conjunction with one of our employee resource groups, helping develop CVs, prepare for interviews, etc.
And maybe, Bob, staying with the same theme in terms of industry and education and the link between industry and education, again, a strong track record going back to the time of EMC and Richard Egan and the story of Larry Poland. The big question was, at the time, which swung EMC now Dell into Cork, was what can we as educators do for your company, and not the other way around. So maybe you might address that issue. And again, with your background knowledge in terms of the National Skills Council, Southwest Regional Jobs Forum, and so on, that important link between education and industry and how they both serve each other.
The partnership between industry and education has, in my opinion, been essential up to now, but now it's coming critical. Dell has been working with CIT, MTU, and UCC on many graduate, postgraduate leadership development programs over many, many years. UCC Masters in Digital Business or the CIT, MTU Masters in Cloud Computing are two most recent examples. Now, though, with lifelong learning in mind, we're beginning to focus more on modular development and micro-credentials. As Jim mentioned earlier, the system needs to be unified and not uniform. We're also looking for other softer skills in candidates. We're looking for curiosity, a growth mindset, emotional intelligence, innovation, leadership skills, especially decision-making. And we're looking to hire candidates with these skills and with the right attitude, and then they'll learn the hard skills pretty easily. Now, if I may finish with this, and I know Dennis is here, the partnership with further education is also important. And in association with Cork ETB and SOLAS, we've run the Female Leadership Development Programme twice now, and we've had a graduation recently, where 5 of those great candidates were promoted in a short space of time.
Right, so thank you again to our industry and community contributors for really inspiring contributions. And note, as we prepare to welcome in our education and civic partners, we'll head over to the OECD and get some words from an international perspective from Karen Maguire, Karen is with the OECD in Paris. So over to you, Karen.
Hello, my name is Karen McGuire, and I'm from the OECD's Local Employment and Economic Development Program, and I'm pleased to join you virtually today. COVID-19 has highlighted the critical importance of access to education and training for all. And in addition to COVID, there are many other challenges that may impact on people's educational outcomes. The change in the Cork City boundary has resulted in a significant demographic shift, a more culturally diverse and younger population. And I know Cork is a learning city, and it has a dynamic Cork Access Network. Educational institutions, the business community, civic and social partners, as well as local government are all working together in the Cork region to mitigate educational disadvantage and improve opportunities for all that will support a dynamic local labor market. The OECD and other cities around the world look forward to learning from the efforts here in Cork as a model for others to follow.
Thank you very much, Karen. Merci beaucoup à Paris. Gur míle maith agat. Thank you. Fáil de roibh go léir isteach. You're all very welcome now to hear the response of our educators to the questions and the challenges posed by Jim and Siobhan and Bob and indeed Paula from the Chamber. And maybe just to welcome our panel here, Dennis Leamy, Chief Executive of the Cork Education Training Board, Professor Maggie Cusack, President of Munster Technological University, Professor John O'Halloran, President of UCC, and at the very end, Anne Doherty, Chief Executive of Cork City Council. And let's be honest, in terms of the CAN network and education in the city council is vital to the whole thing, which is really unique here in Cork, among a lot of unique things in Cork, must say that. First of all, Dennis, turning to yourself in terms of the very important point made by Jim Breslin earlier in terms of meeting people where they're at, not where we want them to be in terms of education and training. How is that being addressed in terms of the CETB?
Well, it's a key objective of CETB, Barry, that we endeavour to meet people where they're at, no matter what situation they find themselves in, no matter what experience that they've had of education, of life, of the different journey that life presents to people along that way. And I suppose through the various levels and courses of engagement that we have, they go from level 1 and right up to level 6 in Cork ETB. But Jim made a very important point around the literacy piece. Like we have a key focus around supporting literacy, numeracy, and now ever more important, digital literacy. Mm-hmm. And it's not just about having the Zoom courses. It's about, I suppose, the connection, the relationship with the tutors. It's the relationship with our people in terms of reaching out to them, making people feel comfortable, and actually working with people in terms of addressing some of the issues and difficulties that they might have. A lot of people have at times a negative experience of education. Everyone goes to primary school, and a lot of people go to second level school, of course, but their experience is very different in many ways. So it's about making people feel comfortable in that space. Maybe there's mental health challenges that they have to overcome. There's anxiety that they need to address, but there's a support there to bring them on that journey, so they can start at wherever they're at, whatever journey they're at, and then they might take a gap on it, but it's about linking back in. It's about keeping that relationship going and keeping the connection with people, so that in Cork ETB we like to think, we talk about pathways, but we like to think we're with people in supporting them on those pathways.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And maybe Maggie, turning to yourself, new president, new university, huge opportunities in terms of encouraging access and facilitating access. How do you view the MTU strategy in terms of access and the whole continuum of education?
Yeah, MTU is absolutely committed to social inclusion and to that equity of access. Mm-hmm. We're really clear that we welcome students from all backgrounds, and it'd be a priority for us to make sure that we work with students from underrepresented groups. And as we say, it's not simply about welcoming them through the door, but about supporting them and making sure that they succeed. So that's support at pre-entry, all the way through, and actually keeping in contact when they graduate. So it's about supporting to succeed, and that's about having that sense of community, which we've heard mentioned by Dennis there.
Excellent, yeah. And maybe John again, I mean, a lot of new this morning, I mean, new president of a very old university, very extinguished or distinguished university.
Yeah, we're an old, but we're learning, and we learn every day. I mean, that's the great thing about a university. I guess, first of all, University College Cork is a research-intensive, globally orientated university. We see it as a global inclusivity as much as the research piece. So our values are spoken to about inclusion and diversity. So we frame it in three ways. We call it the transitioning into the university, transitioning through the university, and transitioning out. So let's take the transitioning in first. University College Cork, we have about 22% of our students come from non-traditional pathways. We want to be part of, or we want our community to be as diverse and as rich as the community outside. But that's all very well if we bring them in. And Jim Breslin mentioned earlier, it's really important people are successful. And we're really proud that our retention rate is up at 94%. So when we bring them in, it's really important that we support them, that people are successful. Second part is transitioning through. So we've got to make sure when people are transitioning through UCC or indeed any program that we speak to true inclusion. So universal design, inclusive learning are core to what we do at UCC in all aspects, and indeed on research. So we have significant research going on with travellers and other communities. And then finally transitioning out. And we do know there are issues about employability for certain groups of people coming out of our institution, and in particular disability. So I think, we've got to make sure that we continue that continuum, transitioning in, transitioning through, transitioning out, and then picking up the lifelong learning that Jim mentioned earlier through either micro-credentialing or further other ways to learning. So that's what we're planning to do and continuing to do, and building on the shoulders of people who've done all that great work in the past.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, that brings in yourself then in terms of the lifelong learning in particular and its role in the city and the fabric of the civic society we have here in Cork.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think that the City Council's commitment to lifelong learning goes back many, many years, right back to 2002, when the Development Board was in place for the city and embedded and deeply rooted in the policy decisions of that board that then became the policies for the city, was about learning, and it had been lifelong learning. And I suppose key to that has been the development of the Lifelong Learning Festival, which of course we'll be delighted to see back in 2022. So everybody book your dates into your diary, because it's going to be just fabulous. But I think it's really, and I think I just want to pick up maybe on something what Siobhan spoke about in the earlier, it is about learning being in the community, our learning neighbourhoods, the importance for really important conversations to happen, because we do have big conversations. We've just been through COVID, but we have climate, biodiversity, and I think having that culture of lifelong learning in our city sends out a message about that those conversations are really welcome, and then we can find solutions together.
Yeah, I mean, turn to yourself again, Jim, in terms of, or Dennis, my apologies, in terms of this particular series being funded by the Mitigating Against Education Disadvantage Fund. I mean, that's a national fund, and it's the priorities that would have secured the funding and the recognition for the Cork Access Network. What priorities do you see there going forward from the ETB's point of view?
Yeah, it's a really, really important fund, and it was an initiative that came about as a result of COVID. That was a policy decision by the department and funded by Solace. And in Cork, we were fortunate we were able to draw down 1.6 million across the city and county, and a lot of that was in terms of just ICT equipment for people, being broadband connection, the things that were reflected in the earlier conversation. And also with that as well, the upskilling and the tutoring and the hand-holding in terms of the digital transformation that was there, and reaching out to the very hard to reach communities, and ensuring that everyone had access that needed it to the equipment was key and critical. And through all the different partners, that was really valuable in doing that. And I suppose it's given us the opportunity to build on the digital transformation. So into the future, the Mitigating Education Disadvantage Fund, it is about looking at the resources that people need to support them to get access to the various levels of education that they're engaged in, and to support that. But the fund is about driving that whole the learning that we've taken from COVID in terms of what it's opened up for us. Paul had made reference to, the whole world of learning and how it's been opened up now in terms of lifelong learning. And the Mitigating Education Disadvantage Fund is putting us in a strong position to build that infrastructure so that we have access to that for all the learners that need it into the future.
Excellent, yeah. And maybe referring back to what Bob Savage said earlier there in terms of widening the value proposition and widening the talent pool in terms of, particularly in the STEM areas, Maggie, how would you see that working out in NTU?
Yeah, I think that's a really important area, and I think what's key here is very much a multi-pronged approach. So Dennis has mentioned, laptop scheme, and certainly we would have about 400 students who would have availed of that. So that's one aspect of support, but I don't think any of us can sit here and say we do one thing and that's going to really achieve everything that we want to do here. So I think for MTU, we're involved in a whole range of initiatives, and I think they all move us along that way, whether it's in STEM or any other subjects that we may look at. So there's the PATH initiative, and certainly that's a collaborative initiative with other HEIs, and that's allowed us to employ a travel education coordinator, which is really key and really important for us. It's also helped us to employ a member of staff who can support students with autism, and that whole area of diversity, we need to think of that word in the largest possible sense of it, the full diversity of humanity, so neurodiversity, all sorts. So I think we can't just afford to say, okay, we're going to think about STEM and we're going to deal with these aspects here. It's that intersectionality of all of those issues of support that do support us in STEM, but support us in other subjects as well.
Sure, yeah. And John, turning to yourself, UCC would have a long tradition in supporting marginalised groups as well, but also this connection with industry and access to industry and vice versa.
Yeah, I think, look, if you want diversity, you've got to support it. You've got to support it to the individual level, but you've also got to support it institutionally. And we have enjoyed, and it's important to say, we have enjoyed significant government support in the last number of years, in fact. And we welcome that, and it's made a big impact, together with our institutions right across here that are sitting in front of us today, jointly working together, focusing on our students and supporting our students and their families. So I think we need to continue to do that. We've got 1916 bursaries, we've got the SOAR project, we've got a whole range of initiatives. But equally, we need to make sure that when people come into our institutions, that the support services are there to do so. So, for example, Autism Friendly is something that we have really worked hard at UCC. We're continuing to do that. We've also got the Changing Places toilets, for example. And it might sound a very simple thing, but it's a human right to be able to go to a toilet. And up to now, we did not, and I don't say this with pride, have the infrastructure to do that. We now have it, and we're proud of it, but maybe we should have a lot more of that kind of infrastructure. So I think it's really important that we support the individual, we support families, and then when we come in, that we support people's learning on the campus in every sense of that word. And many years ago, I chaired a board of management of a primary school, and it's still sitting with me, that word that was mentioned by Mary Toomey, a good West Cork woman. And she said, you can't educate a hungry child. You can't educate someone if they're hungry, if they're suffering from mental illness or mental challenges, or indeed other physical disabilities, or coming from a community where learning is not part of the normal ecosystem in which they live in. So it's complex, and I think we really have to acknowledge that. But I will acknowledge, together with the government, together with our philanthropists, because philanthropy is a silent piece here that maybe many people are not aware of. We at University College Cork enjoy quiet, anonymous, generous people who support students in every way that we might hope and expect. And they're some of the unsung heroes also. So I think it's a really important time. There's a lot done, as they say, but more to do.
Absolutely. And then again, turning to yourself, we have 2 universities. We have 3 of the top 5 FE colleges in the city. We have a lot of professional learning going on. City Council sits on top of all this, or is the interface? And again, I suppose that materialised or crystallised in terms of the UNESCO awarding the Learning City accolade a number of years back. Education very important for the city.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose the UNESCO recognition was, I suppose, a confirmation of the work that was being done. Really, really important. And I think we'll all see the image of, you know, our oldest citizen in the city at the time on the stage being celebrated globally. The image of all the partners standing together, holding hands on the stage. You know, that had a huge impact. And I think that's what's really, really important about Cork and about the message of Cork. It is about all the partners, as John said. You know, if somebody is hungry, they can't learn, or if somebody is homeless, how do we support them? So the importance of the local authority, health, all the education providers, the community and voluntary sector together. That's what makes Cork a UNESCO learning city. Yep. And I think that then the economic benefit of that is hugely important in terms of the message it sends to people who want to come and work here, invest here, but most importantly, that we have an ambition that we don't leave anybody behind. And I think that's what we're about.
Yeah, and again, Dennis, you know, Siobhan mentioned earlier the whole issue of silos. Yeah. I think we are demolishing silos, hopefully in Cork. Yeah.
No, I think
nationally,
there's a strong tradition of demolishing silos in Cork, and I suppose we're thankfully building on it.
The Docklands you're talking about.
Well, it's in collaborating together and respecting each other's position. Like, we all have a role, we all have a role that we have to play, and but I think we're complementary, and we build it, but it's built through the relationships that are built right throughout all of our people interacting, and no problem is too big not to solve. Like, we can by getting together, and we've seen that through the community forum that Anne has led actually in the last year 9 months, with all the different agencies around the table, addressing all the needs of the city, from food poverty to ICT, digitalisation to education, to everything that was needed and required, but by bringing everyone together to look at it. And that didn't happen by just overnight. That was built on everything that happened before, and it's really important to hold on to that. Yeah, I mean, another key thing, I suppose, is, and looking to the future, is what we have to address is the piece around the social capital for people, especially disadvantaged groups. Because John made reference earlier on that a lot of people can come into our education institutions and have pathways, but they mightn't have the same access to success in terms of jobs and employment and their routes, because they haven't got the networks. And a lot of the areas that we're starting to work on now is trying to build that social capital for people that mightn't necessarily have access to it ordinarily. And it's through the partnership that we're building that out, along with the Chamber, along with the Council, along with the education institutions and community education providers.
Yeah, I think, again, Maggie, to yourself, I mean, Dennis has mentioned access, and John the same. Access is important, but success has to be the other side of that coin. So what challenges would you see now are blocking the success of students coming in on access?
Yeah. So we've mentioned funding, and I think the first thing to say is we're really grateful for any funding that is offered.
And you know, yeah.
I think we need to be careful that it's not ad hoc in any sense.
Yeah.
And I would really be pleading for simple, solid funding that's reliable and is straightforward, because I think that allows us to build up momentum as we're helping to support people in access, and we know that those same support systems are available. So that's one thing. We've also spoken about that whole idea of not just welcoming students in through the door, but really supporting them. And underrepresented groups are underrepresented for a reason in our current situation. So people have all sorts of issues to deal with in their own life, and whatever those examples might be. So that means that they do need more support. And I think it's then there's other funding required there, isn't there, to make sure that we can have the people. Often our access offices are run on really small numbers of staff. So I think having those supports there is really important. And to Dennis's point and what John has mentioned, and Anne, it's about working collaboratively to really make sure we know where the best support should be put in place and where the best routes are for the individual success.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And John, given your own long track record in terms of access and promoting access and so on, where do you see the opportunities, challenges?
I think we're seeing it today. We're seeing it right now in front of you. That's the first thing. I'm in ecologists, as many will know, and there's a number of things that guide me in the way I think. One is that diversity begets stability. That's the simple rule of any ecosystem. So the more diversity, the more stable. Secondly, I think we are lucky that we have a really good education ecosystem in Cork, supported by the city. I think that's really critical. What do I mean by that? There's opportunities for all of us to connect easily. And it's our responsibility, actually, to connect. And I think we've got to stop thinking less about institutions and more about pathways, as Dennis and Maggie have said, and where, from the students' point of view, how they see that. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, is the interdependencies that we all have on each other, whether it's in the city, whether it's in education, whether it's health, and on each other personally as well as individually. And I just want to finish with one final point. Jim mentioned earlier digital literacy, and he's absolutely right that we don't leave one thing behind. The other big challenge facing us today is climate change. Yeah. How are we going to develop the literacy in sustainability? We talk about decarbonisation. What does that actually mean? How do we educate each other and learn from each other about that? So I'm excited about the opportunities, but also recognising there are challenges. And I think together we will go far. As Maggie now said many times, together with Dennis, we will go far together, and we have the responsibility to do that, but I'm excited by it.
Yeah, I'm reminded of an old African proverb: if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, together. You go together. So going together, and in terms of the city.
Yeah, I think that we've a great opportunity to, like, we are in a stage of the maturity cycle that maybe others aren't on the island of Ireland. So there is an opportunity for us to be more innovative, but also to be a little bit more testing of things, you know, and if anything that COVID taught us, we have to experiment. So I think that if there was a call I would have, would be that national support for some of that experimentation because of our maturity cycle. It's not that we're better than anywhere else, it's just where we are in that maturity cycle. You know, we've developed the relationships, as John and others, Siobhan, others have spoken about, you know, we've big challenges coming. If we don't keep that infrastructure and that ecosystem going collectively, and that's right from, you know, someone's sitting room doing their aromatherapy to, you know, whatever happens in higher education, that's where we can really, really make a difference. So I think that we've got the infrastructure to do it collectively here. It's about getting some of that seed money to do some of that experimentation that actually we could accelerate our progress as a country.
Yeah. Absolutely. And again, talking to Bob earlier, I think maybe, and bringing back to John's point about philanthropy, we may be knocking on a few doors to get this going, not just at the department, but in Europe as well. So thank you all very much for a very positive contribution, and thanks to Dennis, Maggie, John, and
Pleasure.
And talk to you again later.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.